My 8-year-old son said from his hospital bed, "Dad, I'm going to heaven soon." Holding back tears. "I can't protect you anymore, so please, run away." When I asked why, he replied, "Look in my school locker. You'll understand why." When I checked his locker, I called the cops, but they refused to help me because... Before we continue, subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab channel and let US know where you're listening from in comments. My name is Cody Gross, and I thought I knew what hell looked like until I sat beside my 8-year-old son Danny's hospital bed, watching the machines keep him alive. The doctor said it was acute liver failure, sudden, severe, and with no clear cause. Danny had always been healthy, energetic, the kind of kid who could eat dirt and bounce back stronger than ever. But now he looked so small against those white sheets, tubes running in and out of his tiny body like he was some kind of broken machine they were trying to fix. "Dad," Danny whispered, his voice barely audible over the steady beep of the monitors. His eyes, once bright blue like his mother's, now held a weight no child should ever carry. "I'm going to heaven soon." I gripped the metal rail of his bed until my knuckles went white. "Don't say that, buddy. You're going to be fine. The doctors are working on." "No, Dad." He reached out with his small hand, the one without the four, and touched my arm. His skin felt paper-thin and cold. "I can't protect you anymore, so please, run away." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Protect me? My 8-year-old son thought he was protecting me? From what? "Danny, what are you talking about? Protect me from what?" Tears started rolling down his pale cheeks. "I'm sorry, Dad. I try to keep you safe, but I'm too tired now. I can't eat your food anymore. I can't drink your coffee." He was getting agitated, the heart monitor speeding up. "Look at my school locker. Combination is 0418, your birthday. You'll understand why." A nurse rushed in, alerted by the machines. "Sir, I need you to step back. His vitals are spiking." I was pushed aside as medical staff swarmed around my son. Through the chaos, I heard Danny's weak voice one more time. "Locker 247. Be careful, Dad. They're watching." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the hospital corridor, replaying Danny's words over and over. "You've been eating my food? Drinking my coffee? Why would he say that? And what did he mean they were watching?" My wife, Brittany, had gone home around midnight, claiming she needed rest. She'd been strangely calm throughout this whole ordeal, almost detached. When the doctors first told us about Danny's condition, she didn't break down like I did. She just nodded, asked a few clinical questions, and started making phone calls to handle the situation. At 3 a.m., I made a decision. Danny's elementary school was only 20 minutes away. Security was minimal, a few cameras and a night watchman who spent most of his time sleeping in the main office. I'd helped with enough school events to know the building's layout like the back of my hand. The custodial entrance was my way in. I noticed during a parent-teacher conference that the lock was loose, probably hadn't been properly fixed in years. A few minutes with a credit card, and I was inside the empty hallways. Lincoln Elementary after dark was eerily quiet, my footsteps echoing off the polished floors. I made my way to the 5th grade wing, where Danny's locker sat among dozens of others, each decorated with stickers and photos that spoke of childhood innocence. Locker 247. The combination lock felt cold under my fingers as I entered 0418, April 18th, my birthday. How did Danny know my birthday when Brittany barely remembered it anymore? The lock clicked open. Inside, instead of the usual collection of school supplies and forgotten lunch containers, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a small digital camera, the kind kids weren't supposed to have at school. Beneath, it was a manila envelope thick with photographs and a notebook filled with Danny's careful, 8-year-old handwriting. I grabbed everything and headed to my truck, my hands shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. Back in a hospital parking lot, under the harsh glow of a streetlight, I opened Danny's notebook with trembling hands. The first page made me want to vomit. Daddy Protection Journal. Day 23. Mom put the white powder in Daddy's coffee again this morning. I poured it out when she wasn't looking and made new coffee. She got mad and asked why Daddy's coffee was cold. I said I accidentally knocked it over. She made new coffee with more white powder. I drank half of it when Daddy wasn't looking. It tasted really bitter and made my tummy hurt, but Daddy can't get sick. I flipped through page after page of entries dating back 3 months. Danny had been systematically intercepting poisoned food and drinks meant for me, consuming them himself to keep me safe. My 8-year-old son had been slowly killing himself to protect me. The photographs were worse. Danny had been secretly documenting everything with the camera he'd somehow acquired. There were images of Brittany mixing white powder into my morning coffee. Pictures of her injecting something into my lunch sandwiches with a syringe. Photos of her adding drops from a small vial into my beer bottles. But the most damning evidence was in the final set of photographs. Brittany wasn't working alone. The images showed my wife in the kitchen with Wilson Morrison, my best friend since college, my business partner, the man I trusted with my life and my family. He was handing her small packages, instructing her on dosages, even helping her prepare the poison meals. One photo showed them kissing passionately over my contaminated coffee pot. The final entry in Danny's journal, dated just 2 days ago, broke what was left of my heart. Day 89, I'm really sick now. My pee is dark and my skin looks yellow. Daddy notices I don't eat much anymore, but I can't tell him why. I heard Mom and Uncle Wilson talking about how the poison should have worked by now. They don't know I've been taking it instead. Tomorrow they're going to use more. I don't think I can drink anymore, but I have to try. I love you, Daddy. I hope you never have to read this. I sat in my truck, crying like I hadn't cried since I was a child myself. My son was dying because my wife and best friend had been trying to murder me. For 3 months, Danny had been my unwitting guardian angel, sacrificing his own life to save mine. With shaking hands, I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report an attempted murder and child endangerment. My wife and her accomplice have been poisoning me, and my son intercepted the poison and is now dying in the hospital. Sir, I'm going to transfer you to Detective Wilson Morrison. He handles all poison-related cases in this jurisdiction. My blood turned to ice. Wait, did you say Wilson Morrison? Yes, sir, Detective Morrison. He's our specialist in these types of cases. Please hold. The line went quiet. Then I heard that familiar voice. The voice of the man who'd been my best man at my wedding, who'd held Danny when he was born, who'd been systematically trying to kill me while sleeping with my wife. Cody? That you, buddy? Wilson's voice was perfectly calm, almost amused. I heard you've got some concerns about poisoning. That's a pretty serious accusation. You bastard, I whispered into the phone. I know everything. I have evidence. Photos, journals, everything. Wilson chuckled. Evidence? What evidence? Sounds like you're having some kind of breakdown, friend. The stress of your son's illness is probably getting to you. Sometimes grieving parents imagine all sorts of conspiracies when they can't accept the reality of a sick child. Danny has been drinking the poison meant for me. He documented everything. An 8-year-old's fantasy notebook isn't evidence, Cody. And even if it were, well, I'm the lead detective on poison cases. Any evidence would have to go through me first. Shame if it got lost or contaminated, don't you think? The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Wilson wasn't just my best friend and business partner. He was a decorated police detective with 20 years on the force. He had connections, influence, and the power to make evidence disappear. Even if I took this to the FBI or state police, it would be my word against a respected cop with an impeccable record. Here's what's going to happen, Cody, Wilson continued, his voice turning cold. You're going to accept that your son has some rare illness. You're going to grieve properly. And if you try to cause problems for me or Brittany, well, grief-stricken fathers sometimes do terrible things. Suicide, maybe, or a tragic accident. The stress of losing a child can make a man do unpredictable things. He hung up. I sat in that parking lot for an hour, rage building inside me like molten lava. The system I trusted, the law I believed in, the people I'd loved, they'd all betrayed me. My son was dying because of their greed and lust, and they thought they could just walk away from it. They were wrong. I spent the next day researching everything I could about Wilson Morrison and trying to piece together the full scope of their plan. What I discovered made me realize this conspiracy went deeper than simple murder for insurance money. Wilson had been systematically using his position as a detective to eliminate people who threatened his side businesses. Over the past 5 years, there have been 17 accidental deaths and suicides in our city involving people who'd been investigating financial irregularities or asking too many questions about certain police cases. Wilson wasn't just corrupt, he was a serial killer with a badge. My death was supposed to look like a heart attack brought on by stress. The slow poisoning would mimic the symptoms of cardiovascular disease, especially since I'd been working long hours at the construction company Wilson and I had built together. After my death, Brittany would inherit my half of the business and my life insurance. Nearly $3 million total. But there was more. Brittany had been feeding Wilson information about our clients, particularly those involved in government contracts. Wilson had been using police resources to investigate these clients, gathering blackmail material and inside information that he then sold to competing firms. I was just collateral damage in a much larger operation. The more I learned, the angrier I became. But anger wasn't enough. Danny was still dying, and even if I could somehow expose Wilson and Brittany, the damage was done. The poison had destroyed my son's liver, and the doctors said his chances were slim even with a transplant. I needed more than justice. I needed revenge. That evening, I returned to the hospital to sit with Danny. He was unconscious now, the machines doing most of the work of keeping him alive. Brittany was there, playing the role of grieving mother perfectly. She even managed to produce tears on command. "Oh, Cody," she said, rushing to embrace me. "The doctors said we should start thinking about end-of-life decisions." I held her close, smelling the perfume that Wilson had bought her. I'd seen the receipt in his wallet when he'd paid for dinner last month. "I'm not giving up on him yet. But honey, we have to be realistic. Danny's suffering. Maybe it would be more merciful to what? Kill him." I pulled back to look at her face. She was still beautiful. Blonde hair, blue eyes, the kind of woman who could make men do stupid things. I've been one of those stupid men once. "Is that what you want, Brittany? For Danny to die?" Something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? Of course not. I just meant that sometimes the kindest thing is to let go. Like you let go of our marriage. She stepped back, her expression changing to one of confusion mixed with alarm. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," I said, sitting down beside Danny's bed. "I'm just tired. Why don't you go home and rest? I'll stay with him tonight." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Give Wilson my regards when you see him." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "Wilson? Why would I see Wilson?" "I don't know. You two seem close lately." "Very close." She kissed my forehead, the kiss of Judas. "You're stressed, honey. Try to get some sleep." After she left, I sat with Danny through the night, holding his small hand and making him a promise. "I'm going to make them pay, son. I'm going to make them all pay for what they did to you." To understand how to destroy Wilson Morrison and Brittany, I needed to understand who they really were. I'd known Wilson for 15 years, but apparently, I'd never known him at all. I started with the public records. Wilson had joined the police force straight out of college, quickly rising through the ranks with a combination of natural talent and ruthless ambition. He'd been married twice. Both wives had died in accidents. The first had fallen down the stairs and broken her neck. The second had overdosed on prescription medication. Interesting pattern. Digging deeper into old newspaper archives, I found articles about both deaths. In each case, Wilson had been the grieving widower, collecting substantial life insurance payouts. In each case, he'd remarried within a year. Women who were wealthy, beautiful, and tragically short-lived. Brittany was supposed to be wife number 3, once I was out of the picture. But Wilson's history of murdering wives wasn't his only secret. Using my connections in the construction industry, I started investigating the buildings and properties connected to Wilson's side business. What I found was a network of safe houses, money laundering operations, and drug distribution centers that stretched across 3 states. Wilson Morrison wasn't just a corrupt cop killing inconvenient people. He was the head of a criminal organization that used police resources to eliminate competition and protect their operations. My wife had fallen in love with a monster. Learning about Brittany's background was equally revealing. She hadn't grown up poor like she'd always claimed. Her family, the Alexanders, were old money from Connecticut, wealth built on shipping and imports during the early 20th century. But that wealth had come with a dark legacy. Brittany's great-grandfather had been a bootlegger during Prohibition. Her grandfather had been involved with organized crime, and her father had died in federal prison on racketeering charges when she was 16. She'd been raised by her mother, who'd taught her that marriage was a business transaction and love was a weakness to be exploited. Brittany hadn't married me for love. She'd married me because I was successful, trustworthy, and, most importantly, gullible enough to give her access to my money and business connections. Meeting Wilson had been the final piece of her plan. He had the skills and resources to eliminate me, while she provided the inside access and motive. Together, they'd been planning the perfect crime. Except they hadn't counted on Danny. As I sat in the hospital that fourth night, watching my son fight for his life, I realized that Wilson and Brittany had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the love between a father and son. Danny's sacrifice had not only saved my life, it had given me the evidence and motivation I needed to destroy them both. But I wasn't going to rely on the legal system. Wilson controlled too much of the local law enforcement, and Brittany's family still had connections that could make evidence disappear or witnesses change their minds. I was going to handle this myself, and I was going to make sure they suffered before they died. Planning the perfect revenge required patience, resources, and a complete willingness to cross lines I'd never imagined crossing. Fortunately, 15 years in the construction business had taught me about explosives, heavy machinery, and how to make problems disappear permanently. More importantly, it had taught me about the kind of men who could help with problems that required extreme solutions. Rafael Andrade had worked for me for 3 years before I learned about his past. He'd been a combat engineer in the Army, specializing in demolitions and urban pacification, a polite term for making buildings and the people inside them cease to exist. After his discharge, he'd worked as a freelance problem solver for people who needed things done quietly and efficiently. I found Rafael at his apartment on the east side of town, a sparse place that looked more like a military barracks than a home. When I explained what I needed, he listened without expression, occasionally nodding or asking technical questions. "This Wilson," Rafael said when I finished, "he's expecting you to come at him directly. Grieving father, righteous anger, probably thinks you'll try to shoot him or run him down with a truck. Probably. So we don't do that. We make him come to us on our terms, in a place where his badge and his connections don't matter." Rafael's plan was elegantly simple. Wilson's criminal organization depended on a network of safe houses and distribution points. If those locations were compromised or destroyed, Wilson would be forced to consolidate his operations into a single, defensible position, an abandoned warehouse complex on the outskirts of town that he'd been using as his primary base. More importantly, if his business partners thought Wilson was losing control, they'd demand a face-to-face meeting to discuss restructuring their arrangement. Criminal organizations didn't tolerate weakness or failure. "We hit his operations systematically," Rafael explained, showing me blueprints of the warehouse complex. "Make it look like a rival gang moving in on his territory. He'll have to respond, and when he does, we'll be waiting." "What about Brittany?" Rafael smiled, a cold expression that made me understand why enemies of the United States had learned to fear men like him. "She'll come to him. Women like that always run to the strongest predator when they're scared. She'll think Wilson can protect her. And Danny, your son's a fighter. Keep him alive long enough for us to finish this, and maybe the satisfaction of knowing his sacrifice meant something will help him pull through." Over the next week, we put our plan into motion. Rafael had contacts in the criminal underworld, men who were happy to cause problems for corrupt cops in exchange for cash and the promise of reduced competition. The first target was a meth lab Wilson operated in an abandoned gas station. The explosion was visible from miles away and made the evening news as a gas leak accident. The second was a money laundering operation disguised as a used car lot. That fire burned for 6 hours and destroyed over $1 million in illegal proceeds. By the third operation, a drug distribution center in a converted restaurant, Wilson knew he was under attack. The beauty of Raphael's plan was that all the evidence pointed to a gang war between rival criminal organizations. Wilson couldn't call for police backup without exposing his own illegal activities. He was on his own, exactly where we wanted him. Wilson Morrison was many things: murderer, criminal, corrupt cop. But he wasn't stupid. After losing 3 major operations in 5 days, he knew someone was systematically dismantling his empire. What he didn't know was who or why. I'd been careful to maintain my routine during this period. I visited Danny at the hospital every day, played the grieving father perfectly, and even had dinner with Brittany twice. Meals where I pretended to eat food that she'd probably poisoned while secretly disposing of it when she wasn't looking. "You seem better," she said on Friday night, as we sat in our dining room pretending to be a normal married couple. More optimistic about Danny. "The doctors say there might be some improvement in his liver function. Small changes, but positive ones." That was true, since I'd stopped consuming the poison meant for me, and Danny was no longer intercepting it. The toxins in his system were gradually being processed out. He was still critical, but no longer deteriorating. Brittany's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's wonderful news. Maybe we should celebrate." She reached for a bottle of wine, expensive stuff that I was sure had been doctored with something lethal. "I think I'll stick to water tonight. My stomach's been upset." "Are you sure? This is a special bottle. Wilson brought it over yesterday." Of course he had. Wilson was here yesterday, just for a few minutes. He wanted to check on how we were handling everything with Danny. He's such a good friend. "Yes, he is." "What did you two talk?" "In the kitchen, mostly." "Why?" "No reason. I'm just glad he's looking out for us." That night, after Brittany went to bed, I searched the kitchen and found 3 new vials of poison hidden behind the flour canister, enough to kill a dozen men. Wilson was getting desperate and increasing the dosage. It was time to spring the trap. I called Wilson's cell phone at 2 a.m., knowing he'd be awake and paranoid after losing another operation that evening. "Cody? What's wrong?" "Is it Danny?" "Wilson, I need your help. Someone broke into the house tonight while Brittany and I were at the hospital. They didn't take anything, but they left a message." "What kind of message?" "It's written on the wall in the kitchen. It says, 'We know about the warehouse. You have 48 hours. "Wilson, what warehouse? What does this mean?" The silence on the other end lasted nearly 30 seconds. "I'll be right over." "Should I call the regular police?" "No." His response was too quick, too sharp. "No, this sounds like it might be related to some cases I'm working on. Don't call anyone else until I get there." "Okay, but Wilson, I'm scared. If someone's targeting us because of your police work." "They're not targeting you, Cody. This is about me. Pack a bag for you and Brittany. I'm going to take you somewhere safe until this blows over." "What about Danny?" "I can't leave Danny. The hospital is the safest place for him right now. These people won't hurt a sick child." He was right about that. They wouldn't hurt Danny because they were Danny's father and his father's friends. But Wilson didn't know that I knew. "Okay," I said. "How long should we pack for?" "A few days, maybe a week." "And Cody? Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not your family, not your employees, not anyone. These are dangerous people." After he hung up, I called Raphael. He took the bait. He's coming to collect us now, probably taking us to the warehouse. "Perfect. We'll be ready." I went upstairs and woke Brittany, telling her about the break-in and Wilson's plan to take us somewhere safe. She played her part perfectly. Concerned wife, grateful for Wilson's protection, frightened by the mysterious threat. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have actually felt sorry for her. Wilson arrived within 20 minutes, armed and wearing tactical gear under his jacket. He surveyed the fake message Raphael and I had painted on the kitchen wall, nodding grimly. "This is worse than I thought," he said. "These people are professionals. We need to get you out of here now." "Who are they?" Brittany asked, clinging to his arm. "What warehouse are they talking about?" "It's complicated. Let's just say I've made some enemies in my line of work. The important thing is keeping you two safe." We drove through the night to Wilson's warehouse complex, exactly as Raphael had predicted. The building was a fortress surrounded by high fences and equipped with security cameras and motion sensors. Wilson had prepared this place to withstand a siege. Too bad he'd invited the enemy inside. The warehouse complex was larger than I'd expected, 3 connected buildings spread across 5 acres of industrial wasteland. Wilson had turned it into his personal kingdom, complete with living quarters, offices, and storage areas for his various criminal enterprises. "You'll be safe here," he assured us as we entered through a reinforced steel door. "This place is off the grid. No one can find you here." Brittany looked around with obvious familiarity. This wasn't her first visit to Wilson's stronghold. She moved through the corridors like she knew exactly where everything was located. "How long do we have to stay here?" I asked, playing the role of concerned husband. "Until I can neutralize the threat," Wilson replied. "A few days, maybe longer. I've got enough supplies to last a month if necessary." He showed us to a living area that had been set up like a luxury apartment: kitchen, bedrooms, entertainment center. It would have been comfortable if it weren't a prison. "I need to make some calls," Wilson said. "There are people I have to contact about this situation. Make yourselves at home." As soon as he left, Brittany dropped her act. "This is perfect," she said, settling onto the couch with obvious relief. "Once Wilson eliminates whoever's been causing problems, we can move forward with our plans." "What plans?" She looked at me with genuine surprise. "Our plans, honey, for after Danny." She couldn't quite bring herself to say it. "After things settled down, Wilson and I thought we might go away for a while. Maybe Europe. You should come with us." "That sounds nice," I said, sitting beside her. "The 3 of us together." "Exactly. Like a family." I reached over and stroked her hair, soft, blonde, and paid for with money I'd earned while she was planning my murder. "Brittany, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you love me?" The question caught her off guard. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. Then she smiled and leaned against me. "Of course I love you, Cody. You're my husband. But do you love Wilson too?" This time she didn't recover as quickly. Wilson is helping us through a difficult time. By sleeping with you?" She went rigid against me. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about you and Wilson planning to kill me so you could be together. I'm talking about Danny intercepting the poison you meant for me and slowly dying because of it. I'm talking about 3 months of watching my son sacrifice his life to save mine." Brittany tried to pull away, but I held her tightly, not enough to hurt her, but enough to keep her from running. "I don't know what you think you. I know everything, Brittany. I have photographs, journals, evidence of everything you and Wilson have been doing. The only reason I'm here is to make sure you both pay for what you did to Danny." She stopped struggling and looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. "If you know, then why did you come here? Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because Wilson is the police. Because the system failed me and my son. Because sometimes a man has to handle things himself." That's when Wilson walked back into the room, and I realized he'd been listening from the doorway. Well, he said, drawing his service weapon. "Cody Gross, the grieving father who's too smart for his own good." Wilson kept his gun trained on me while Brittany scrambled to the other side of the room. The mask of friendship was completely gone now, replaced by the cold expression of a predator who'd been cornered. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Danny figured it out first. He's been protecting me for months, eating and drinking the poison you 2 meant for me." Brittany made a sound like a wounded animal. "The poison was never supposed to hurt Danny. It was just meant for her." "Shut up," Wilson snapped. "It doesn't matter now. The kid's going to die anyway, and so is Cody." "What about our plans?" Brittany asked. "What about Europe?" Wilson laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the warehouse walls. "Plans? You think I was actually going to run away with you? You were useful, Brittany, but you were never the end game. After Cody died, I would have given you a few months to grieve. Then you'd have had an unfortunate accident, just like my first 2 wives." The realization hit Brittany like a slap. "You killed him too." "Of course I killed him. Just like I've killed 17 other people who got in my way. Just like I'm going to kill both of you." That's when the lights went out. The warehouse was plunged into absolute darkness, and Wilson's carefully controlled environment became a battlefield where his advantages meant nothing. I heard him curse and move toward where he thought I'd been sitting, but Raphael and I had planned for this moment. While Wilson and Brittany had been talking, I'd been slowly moving toward a hidden panel where Raphael had concealed night vision equipment and weapons. As soon as the power cut, triggered by Raphael from outside. I rolled behind cover and activated the night vision goggles. Wilson was stumbling around in the dark, trying to use his police training to clear the room systematically. Brittany was pressed against the far wall, crying and calling his name. "Wilson," she sobbed. "What's happening?" "Someone cut the power," he replied, his voice professionally calm despite the circumstances. "Stay where you are. Don't move." I could see him clearly through the night vision, a green-tinted figure moving cautiously through the darkness, sweeping his weapon back and forth. He was good, but he was also predictable. Police training emphasized control and procedure, but this wasn't a normal law enforcement situation. This was personal. I picked up a wrench from Raphael's toolkit and threw it across the room. Wilson spun toward the sound, firing twice. The muzzle flashes destroyed his night vision temporarily, and I used that moment to move closer. "You know what your problem is, Wilson?" I called out from the darkness. "You always underestimated the people you were trying to kill. Show yourself, Cody. Let's end this like men. Like you ended it with your wives? Like you were going to end it with me? No thanks." I threw another tool in a different direction. Wilson fired again, but his shots were wild now. He was losing control, letting fear override his training. "Your son is going to die," he said. "Try to regain psychological control. Even if you kill me, Danny is still going to die. The damage is done. Maybe, but at least he'll know his father made you pay for what you did." I circled around behind him while he was focused on the wrong area. Wilson Morrison, decorated police detective, serial killer, destroyer of families, never saw me coming. When I hit him with the tire iron, he went down hard. Wilson wasn't dead, but he wasn't getting up anytime soon. I zip-tied his hands and feet while he was unconscious, then turned my attention to Brittany. She was still cowering against the wall, no longer the confident woman who'd been planning my death. In the green glow of the night vision, she looked small and pathetic. "Please don't kill me," she whispered. "I'll disappear. I'll never bother you again. I'll confess to everything. Will you bring Danny back to health? Will you give him back the months he spent slowly dying to protect me?" I didn't know he was taking the poison. I swear I didn't know. "But you knew you were putting poison in my food. You knew you were trying to murder your husband, the father of your child." Raphael's voice came through the small radio I'd been carrying. "Cody, we've got company. Wilson's partners are here. 3 cars, maybe 8 men. They're surrounding the building. Perfect timing. Wilson's criminal associates had come for their meeting, probably expecting to find their leader in control of the situation. Instead, they were walking into a trap. I dragged Wilson to a chair and slapped him awake. His eyes were unfocused, but he was conscious enough to understand what was happening. "Your friends are here," I told him. "The ones you've been stealing from, lying to, putting at risk with your sloppy operation. What do you think they'll do when they find out you've been compromised?" Wilson's face went pale. Criminal organizations had simple solutions for members who became liabilities. "You can't do this. I'm a police officer. You're a murderer who hides behind a badge. Your own partners are going to execute you, and I'm going to watch." The sound of gunfire erupted outside as Raphael and his associates engaged Wilson's crew. It was a brief, violent exchange that ended with silence. Raphael had chosen his allies well, former military contractors who specialized in this kind of work. When the shooting stopped, Raphael's voice came through the radio again. "All clear. Wilson's people won't be bothering anyone anymore." I looked at Brittany, who was staring at me with absolute terror. "You want to live?" She nodded frantically. "Then you're going to help me save Danny. Wilson has connections with doctors who don't ask questions about how their patient got sick. You're going to use those connections to get Danny the treatment he needs, and you're going to pay for it with every penny of the money you stole from me." "What about Wilson?" I glanced at my former best friend, who was slumped in the chair with blood running down his face. "Wilson is going to disappear. Corrupt cops who get exposed have a habit of running away to countries without extradition treaties. At least, that's what the official report will say." Raphael entered the warehouse with 2 of his associates. They moved with military precision, securing the area and checking for additional threats. "What's the plan for him?" Raphael asked, nodding toward Wilson. "Make it look like he fled the country. Clean out his bank accounts, create a paper trail showing he bought a plane ticket to somewhere without extradition. Leave his car at the airport. And the reality? I looked at Wilson, who was trying to focus on our conversation through his concussion. The reality is that he's going to spend the rest of his life in a very uncomfortable place, thinking about what he did to my son. Raphael nodded. He understood the kind of justice that couldn't be found in courtrooms. 3 months later, Danny came home from the hospital on a Tuesday morning in spring. The experimental treatment had worked. His liver function was returning to normal, and the doctors said he'd make a full recovery. Brittany had kept her end of the bargain. She'd used Wilson's medical connections to get Danny the best possible care, paying for everything with money from Wilson's hidden accounts. After that, she disappeared, probably somewhere in South America where her family's old connections could keep her safe. I didn't care where she went as long as she stayed gone. The official story was that Detective Wilson Morrison had been discovered to be involved with criminal organizations and had fled the country when an investigation got too close. His abandoned car was found at the airport, and airline records showed he'd bought a ticket to Brazil. No one looked too hard for him after that. Corrupt cops who ran away weren't worth the resources it would take to bring them back. Danny never asked what happened to his mother or Uncle Wilson. He was smart enough to understand that some questions were better left unasked. Instead, he focused on getting better, on going back to school, on being a normal 8-year-old boy. Sometimes, late at night, he'd ask me about the journal he'd kept. "Dad, do you think I did the right thing? Protecting you like that? You saved my life, son. You saved both our lives. But I got really sick." "Yes, you did. But you also show me how strong you are, how much you love me. And that gave me the strength to protect both of us." He'd nod and go back to sleep, satisfied with that answer. I never told him the details of what happened to Wilson and Brittany. He didn't need to carry that weight. It was enough that justice had been served, even if that justice came from outside the system that had failed us. Some people might say I went too far, that I should have found another way. But those people never had to watch their child dying, because the people they trusted most had betrayed them. They never had to choose between letting murderers go free or taking justice into their own hands. I made my choice, and I'd make it again. Danny was alive. The people who tried to destroy our family were gone, and we had a future together. Sometimes that's the only justice that matters, the kind a father creates for his son, no matter what the cost. As I tucked Danny into bed that night, he looked up at me with those bright blue eyes that had seen too much but still held hope for tomorrow. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. Forever and always." And for the first time in months, we both slept peacefully, knowing we were finally safe. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.